Hello, everyone. This is the podcast about all things modern wellness and well being. And today, Sarah is here with me, and I'm very excited to speak with her about her journey from psychotherapy work to energy healing with a focus on eating and living a more empowered life. Thank you so much for being here, Sarah.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, I'd love to start to learn about your journey into the work you currently do. If you could speak about that for a bit.
Sure. I love sharing my journey and my story. And it started back when I graduated college. I initially worked at Yale University at a research center for obesity and learned a lot about health and weight issues. And that got me really interested and aware of what an issue it was that people struggled with food and wanted to work one on one with people. So I transitioned into personal training to try and help people improve their health. And what I realized through personal training was that people, uh, they could exercise as much as they wanted, but there were a lot of underlying mental and emotional issues that were driving their eating habits and their overall mental health. And so that inspired me to go back to grad school. And around the same time, I actually ended up developing my own eating disorder. And I struggled with bulimia for 6 years. And so when I went back to grad school to study therapy, I was really wanting to understand the psychology of our relationship with food and our body and our eating habits so that I could not only help myself, but I could work to help women and men who were struggling with the same issues I was so that they never had to kind of go through the sort of torture and pain that I was experiencing. And so through that process, I did slowly improve. My symptoms got better and better, but I was still struggling even as a therapist. And so once I graduated with my master's in marriage and family therapy, I actually started working at an eating disorder center, running a treatment program for binge eating disorder. And so I spent a few years doing that work, but felt like my clients were still kind of stuck in a lot of their symptoms, and I was still struggling from time to time. So that really motivated me to find sort of a missing link or the real solution to my issues with food in my body, because I felt like I knew all of the therapies or sort of the golden approaches that I was trained in through school, and I just felt like there had to be more that I didn't yet have access to or yet wasn't aware of. And so I ended up actually leaving that role and just spending time experimenting with any and every healing modality I could get my hands on. And it brought me to the world of energy work and energy healing. And that was for me the game changer that within 6 months, I think totally changed the trajectory of my life, but also led me on a path of recovery that I had not been able to achieve prior. So once I stumbled upon that, I got really excited and passionate about learning and becoming certified in those modalities and being able to use that with my one on one clients so they could experience the remarkable shifts that I had.
Yeah, it seems like you really went through a transition from more kind of traditional psychology to accessing, healing from very different perspective. And I love that you kept learning, and you have so much experience with just pure therapy. So you kind of really see what that can do and what that can accomplish. And then, in addition, or as an extra thing, what energy work can really accomplish. And I'm sure it's given you a lot of benefits personally. So you've kind of shared your personal perspective, right?
Completely. And that's exactly right. I mean, there are amazing therapists out there, and therapy can be highly effective for people struggling with any mental health condition. I just found for myself personally the approach and processes that were most effective in my own healing journey were these energy work techniques. And I find that that's what really helps my clients experience the shifts that they desire. And so I have transitioned to becoming an energy work practitioner solely because that's what lights me up. And that's what I think is oftentimes maybe missing from more traditional approaches. And so for people who have gone the traditional route and are still struggling, I want people to know there are other approaches and other options, right? That they can add to their kind of holistic approach to wellness. And maybe energy work is one of those missing links or those missing pieces to the puzzle that someone hasn't yet tried or considered.
Yeah, that's really good to know. And always kind of remember that there's other things to try. Even if you're doing one thing, like you could still try something else. So before we dive into the specific work that you do and how you work with clients, I wanted to know what are some wellness or just any kind of practices that are important to you personally?
I love that question. I'm really big on self care and prioritizing, these sort of feel good practices. And for me, that really includes spending time in nature, whether that's going to the beach or just to the park simply to ground on earth. I start every morning doing a 20-minute meditation and spending some time either doing emotional freedom technique or Reiki, depending how much time I have. I also love doing breath work and breathing exercises and just reading and journaling.
Has it taken some time to get into some of these, I guess, rituals or habits to
Yeah,
practices in your life?
absolutely. It has. And what I started to do to really make it a habit was reserved out 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the evening before I go to bed, and just gave myself that time to do any of those activities, and just naturally started to have that become more automatic. So now I look forward to and sort of expect to spend my time doing those things. And if I don't, it's hard for me to really get into the groove of the day because I haven't had my kind of end caps of self care.
Yeah, that's a really good thing to note. I think it's really important to kind of know how to introduce certain practices into your life. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so you talk a lot about living in food freedom. It's sort of a phrase you use throughout the materials and your website and just how you communicate about food. So one of the things you talk about in that topic is empowered eating. So I wanted to know what is empowered eating and how is it different from intuitive eating, and is there any similarity? And just why do you love the phrase food freedom and empowered eating?
Yeah, absolutely. One reason I love the phrase food freedom, and there's a lot of people in this coaching or sort of emotional eating or weight loss world who will use those words. But what it means to me, I know when I was struggling with my eating disorder, I thought I was going to have to use willpower for the rest of my life to resist the urges to binge and to overeat. Anybody who struggles with overthinking about food or intense food cravings or eating habits that feel out of control know that just the idea of food is constantly on your mind. And when an urge or impulse strikes, it's really hard to resist and not give in. And so I thought I was just going to have to use willpower to resist those things my whole life. And once I started doing the deeper inner work, really addressing the emotional and mental root and energetic root issues that were in the subconscious and in my body, and working to reprogram my subconscious brain and do all these things, the urges and impulses slowly started to just disappear, right? They got less and less intense and happened less and less frequently, to the point where I could be in a restaurant surrounded by food that I used to binge on and not even have a desire to eat it. And that to me is what I mean by freedom. It's you suddenly feel like as normal as possible around food. It no longer controls you. And that's why I also love the term empowered eating, because you're taking your power back from food. You finally feel like food doesn't control your life, it doesn't control your mind. And for me, empowered eating is different from intuitive eating in the sense that intuitive eating is about honoring your body's intuition, what you truly are hungry for, how much your body needs to eat. Eat when you're hungry, stop when you're satisfied. And that is a really, really valuable process. But I find for myself and a lot of the women I work with, their intuition, they're so out of touch with their body and intuition that it's hard to actually trust yourself to actually know, what am I actually hungry for? Is this actually physical hunger? I think I'm still hungry, but maybe I'm not hungry. So there's confusion when it comes to discerning your intuition from sort of this disorder. With empowered eating, we empower you, or empowered myself, to actually understand what is driving my eating in the first place. What are the underlying root issues? And how can I work on actually shifting those so that I'm able to connect to my intuition? So I'm able to rebuild and reestablish trust with myself and my body. A lot of people, myself included, really hate themselves and hate their body for having this problem in the first place. And so you have to repair that relationship, right? It's like a relationship with a boyfriend. You go to couples counseling. It's like we have to work on improving our relationship so we can communicate better and forgive each other for all the things we've done in the past so we can move forward. And with the empowered eating process, that's what I teach people to do. It's like you have to make peace with yourself and your body and food for everything that's happened in the past to be able to create the relationship with food you want moving forward.
Yeah, and that's a good visual as well, because you're definitely developing a relationship with yourself. Because I feel like as conscious beings, we see ourselves as kind of like, we identify as like, I am me, but I also have this understanding that I am not me, of like at the same time, and that I can
Mm,
speak with myself, you know?
right.
So it's this relationship with this idea or concept or feeling that is very hard to define and work with. And I feel like going from um, describing eating as empowered eating as a way to create that kind of connection to your intuition, and then you can, work on whatever you want with that intuition, whether it be intuitive eating or just listening to your intuition. I think that's a really great bridge to talk about. And you certainly can just jump into, just listen to what your body says, because if for years you haven't been listening, you don't even know how to go about it, right? And
Exactly. And for years, my body was telling me to binge and purge. So listening to my body sometimes, and my brain, which had been hardwired in maladaptive ways, was not helping me. Right. And so if you have created these unhealthy thinking patterns or eating patterns that are just automatic, then your brain is still going to tell you to engage in these behaviors, or that you still are craving these foods. And so sometimes you have to go through a process of unlearning or reprogramming on, in terms of how our neural networks are working and our brain is working, to, like you said, be able to finally make a true connection to intuition so you can trust what your body's telling you. Because for many years, I did not trust the cues that I was receiving. I felt very weary of anything that my body told me, because I didn't want to make a wrong choice or end up binging and purging again.
yes, of course, you have to learn to trust what your body is signaling.
Yeah,
You've not been trusting for so long, and that kind of relationship needs a lot of repair, right?
completely. Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to briefly discuss is, what does food and eating issues look like in daily life? Like, why are they so kind of disastrous to living a more empowered and like normal, or just existing, just being able to exist? Why do they make it difficult?
Yeah, great question. And there's a variety of answers to that depending on the symptoms someone's experiencing. My wheelhouse is really when with people who experience intense food cravings, overeating, binge eating, loss of control of eating, and or trying to undo that by throwing up or over exercising. I'd say the ways that that affects someone the most are, first of all, people obsess about food and their body. It is something that is on their mind all the time. And that can create a lot of anxiety, and it keeps somebody from being fully present in other work, right? Maybe they have this big mission or something they're passionate about, or an idea they know they're here to do, or just even the way they're able to show up in relationship. If you're anxious around food or worried about what to eat, you might decline social invitations, or you might, instead of enjoying Thanksgiving, be extremely anxious. So that's one big way. Another is obviously your physical health. So it can contribute to weight gain. But if you are binging and purging, it can affect your hormones, it can affect your esophagus, your heart. There's a lot of physical consequences that can be detrimental to one's well being. And I think the other big way is just in general, it prevents you from truly feeling at peace with yourself. There's oftentimes a belief that I have to control my food in order to like myself, or I have to look a certain way in order to feel good enough or worthy of loving myself. And so we can find a lot of actually self-hate and shame and guilt that is attached to these sorts of behaviors that keep someone from truly feeling happy. And I think at the end of the day, we all want to feel happy no matter what is going on in our life.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And thank you for sharing the different ways that can look like. One question I wanted to briefly touch on is, um, how does the sense of control come in eating disorders and a focus on food? Wanted to hear your take on that.
Yeah, control is a big word in eating disorder recovery and treatment. A lot of people assume if somebody has issues with food, it's a control issue. And there's some truth to that to a certain extent. But my belief is that our need to try and control something stems from essentially a root issue around shame and one's self image, that I have to have things occur in a way that I feel I'm good enough according to whatever expectations or societal standards I've agreed upon or are in place. And so I'm trying to control everything so that I A, feel safe, but B, don't feel surprised. So I can create this facade or this false self that feels good enough in whatever's going on in the world. And so if I lose control, then people might actually see the real me, and that feels terrifying. So we use food to kind of become the coping mechanism to deal with some underlying unresolved emotional issues. Or food can even be a way to put on weight that serves as a protection. A lot of people who struggle with overweight don't feel comfortable being seen or having attention on them. And so it can create an actual physical barrier to subconsciously create a sense of protection.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. I think those are really interesting and important ideas to kind of know, kind of as a background. One question I have is, why are food and eating issues so common, and especially with women? When we talk about them and hear about them, they often come up in the sphere of, how they influence young girls and women. I'm sure it happens across both genders, but in general, why do they seem to be so common?
The big reason is our society has created expectations, messaging, and put billions of dollars into a beauty industry, fashion industry, and food and fitness industry that bombards us with marketing telling us we're supposed to look a certain way, whether it's thin or super fit, right? There's all these messages about how you should look or what needs to change to be better or to be beautiful or to be acceptable. And so at a very young age, girls have these images of how they believe they're supposed to be or look. You couple that with the messaging that they receive from family. I've worked with a number of women whose parents would make comments about her weight, or you need to lose weight, or as women go from a child to a teen and they start to develop breasts and a butt, right? There can be all these comments about their body that make them feel shame or like there's something wrong with their body. And then we also get on the flip side a lot of messaging from especially the food industry that normalizes overeating, that wants us to go overeat or binge or indulge in all these decadent and unhealthy foods. And so we actually are just completely confused with the over information and marketing information about what to eat, how much to eat, how you should look, what workout to do, intermittent fasting, paleo, like it's just too much. And if a girl grows up in an environment where she doesn't have a person to model to her appropriate healthy behaviors, especially how to appropriately handle her emotions, then at a very young age, she can start to use food as a way to deal with inner discomforts and emotions as they surface. And so that combination just creates sort of the perfect container for girls to really, really struggle with their relationship with food in their body.
Yeah, I feel, especially in America, there's quite a bit of strangeness and weirdness around like um, healthy food habits. And I mean, eating and food habits is definitely a cultural and societal um, element, and we learn a lot in our family as well. But the marketing certainly doesn't help. So you're right, it's a very strange combination of messages that really send are confusing
Yes.
overall.
And we have a toxic food environment in terms of the actual food products that are created and sold and what's in them, right? The substances themselves can be very addictive, especially sugar products and processed foods with added sugars. And I remember being so angry when I was stuck in my disorder because anywhere I went, there were all these foods that my brain was addicted to. And you don't get it. You don't binge on carrots. You're not going to binge on a salad. Like real natural foods that come from the earth and are meant to be food processed by the human body are not addictive. You're not going to develop an eating disorder with them. But we live in a food culture where we're surrounded by these foods and it makes it really hard to resist the urges. And even people who struggle with alcohol addiction can abstain from drinking alcohol. You don't need that to live, but you need food to live. And so, here you are in a situation at a restaurant where it's like, I have to eat, and everything on the menu potentially is bad for you or could lead you to binge. And it just makes it really challenging.
Yeah, it sounds like one of the most challenging addictions when spoken to in that way. Um, when you're working with clients, do you find that they seem to relate with the stories and narratives of how they grew up, um, what they were, what food and kind of food habits they learned in their families? Do you find that they remember that or identify with that?
Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. Sometimes it's blatantly obvious. Women will tell me growing up in my household, I had very strict food rules. I wasn't allowed to eat these things, and I would sneak behind my parents' back and go get candy and cookies and things and eat them in secret. And they still continue with that behavior as an adult. Often people can identify that they used to use food as a reward, or food would be a celebratory thing, right? So there's a lot of positive associations and attachments with certain foods or memories. And so as an adult, they can recognize I still emotionally eat or crave those specific foods. Other times the connection isn't as obvious, and it can take a little bit of digging to really uncover what the eating programming is. So sometimes we'll see people received messages growing up that they had to clear their plate before they could leave the table, and they were punished if they didn't eat everything on their plate. So they've actually learned through fear as an adult, I have to eat everything or I'm bad or wrong. Or there's maybe starving people in another country and there's this guilt and shame attached to needing to finish things, otherwise it feels wasteful or wrong. So there's a number of eating programming that a person can exhibit or kind of uncover through introspection or just awareness. And usually, once we uncover it, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I feel like the pieces come together at that.
Exactly.
One thing I wanted to also mention is if you could talk briefly about body image and how deeply uh, food and eating habits connect with body image in our culture.
Sure. Well, more than anything, people are driven to go on diets or try and control their eating because they're trying to obtain a specific body, right? That's really what, more than anything, our society values physical appearance and beauty and having a beautiful body above all else. And that's what we value more than intelligence or your heart or, what you create. And so when it comes to our body image, most women are highly dissatisfied with their body. They have learned to be highly critical, to rather than, we talked about intuition, rather than learn how to like love and care for the body, it becomes a trying to force my body through criticism to change or be better in ways that may be actually unnatural to the body. And so rather than creating this really beautiful relationship with it, we're constantly fighting the thing that is essentially our number one caretaker, right? Your body is with you from the time of birth to the time of death, and it is your vessel to experience this life. We just haven't learned how to properly listen to it and care for it. And that can be a lifelong battle of hating oneself because the body doesn't meet the image that has been essentially, programmed to us of how we should look.
Yeah, I feel that's definitely a big deal, especially in America, and a lot of the media and how a lot of the media presents uh, women, just anyone that is in the spotlight.
Yeah. The
That
rates of body dissatisfaction with men are equally as high as women. So while men don't always exhibit the same frequency of eating disordered habits, their level of insecurity or dissatisfaction with their body, because they're programmed as much as we are about what a man looks like and how the muscular build should be or how fit he should be. And that's just not really realistic for most men. And so, yeah, it's something that plagues both sexes.
Yeah. But one thing that I noticed in the last couple years is a really big shift in the marketing materials of many major companies are have been forced to go into like, all bodies are good kind of messaging. So that's been really nice to see. It's not going to completely reverse, what's been put out in the last like 50 years. But it's been nice to see that, um, the companies out there that are producing different products are forced to change the messaging based on what people truly like expect and believe. And that means that the
Yes.
beliefs are changing. So that's been really nice to see.
Agreed. There's the body neutrality and body positivity movements, which really are trying to show bodies at all shapes and sizes and really let women and girls know that you are enough and beautiful no matter what or how your body looks. That's not what defines you.
Yeah. I'd like to move to a little bit about your approach to working with clients. So, you have a very unique approach of combining EFT and Reiki and different kinds of, speaking with the client, like a type of coaching, but really focus on energy work as it can access different points in a person that maybe pure therapy can't. So I wanted to start with, what is EFT? How does it work?
Absolutely. EFT is emotional freedom technique, also known as tapping. And that's a process that involves tapping on acupuncture points in the body that are connected to the energy meridians while focusing on the thought or feeling or condition that is affecting somebody that they want to shift or improve. So, one of the reasons I liked energy work in the first place and kind of made that transition was with therapy, we can talk about the problems, but your thoughts are forms of energy in the body, and what you think or focus on creates an emotional reaction. And emotions are energy and motion. So both thoughts and feelings are forms of energy in the body. And really, relief and shifts in symptoms happens when we can move that energy and release it from the body in whatever form it takes. And so with tapping, we're able to either release the stress or the anger or the sadness by tapping on the points and focusing on the thought that is producing that feeling. And people experience really quick shifts and improvement when we do that. Additionally, with tapping, studies show it reduces cortisol levels in the brain and body by up to 24% in a session. So it actually is sending a signal to the brain that it's safe to relax and that you're not in danger. And it can really help actually reprogram your subconscious brain. So we have these neural networks and habit loops. A lot of our thoughts are like a tape on replay. And when we're tapping, we can help interrupt some of those neural networks and lay the foundation for a cognitive shift or a new belief to take place.
That's really nice to know that very small movement can create that kind of release. And do you direct clients to think about something that is uncomfortable during this time, or is it kind of like you get into kind of a mental, emotional space of focusing on something that maybe they don't want to think about?
I can approach it both ways. Usually, someone comes in, there's something present in their life that is causing discomfort, anxiety, stress, anger. And I'll use that as the springboard to uncover what else is unresolved from the past that is potentially being triggered in this moment, flooding you with an even more intense experience of that anxiety or causing you to stay stuck in this belief that no longer serves you. So, pretty much 9 out of 10 times, there's going to be a memory, an experience, a message from one's childhood or adolescence that is still alive inside, affecting them in the present moment, and that is, creating their subconscious programming that they're operating from. And so we'll work on let's resolve the issue in the present moment coming up for you, and then use that to also resolve things from the past, so we can kind of hit it from both angles.
Yeah,
And
that's a good point.
and to also just address what you said it's neat that small movements can create big change. And it really is true and remarkable, because when I first encountered this technique, was so skeptical. Really thought that it sounded silly to me, that tapping on 9 points of my body was somehow going to make me feel better or get rid of my urge or desire to binge. Like, that just seemed a little ridiculous. And yet I went through the process and was amazed that I had no desire to binge anymore, and I felt like remarkably better. So, to anyone listening, to just really keep an open mind to what is possible with new techniques, even if they seem silly or ridiculous.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. It definitely takes time to like let in new ideas, and then you try them and you think, oh, okay, this is very interesting, or this could really work. Like, there's some steps you probably take like before you can try this new idea. And I think that's part of the process as well. One thing I wanted to touch on again is, since you spent so many years providing therapy um, to clients and groups, you started to feel like there was something missing there. So now that you've had a lot, time providing like other kinds of services through energy work, what do you think was really missing from the traditional kind of talk therapy you were doing?
I can only speak to my experience, which was, and I noticed this when I was working at the Eating Disorder Center, I was not comfortable with other people's intense emotions. I didn't know what to do with them because I had never actually processed my own. I had learned to repress my feelings. I always operated on a I'm happy, life is great mindset without addressing the deeper pains. And so when I discovered energy work and tapping, it literally, emotional freedom frees or brings up these emotions that we repressed. So it gave me a way to finally feel and uncover and free emotions I didn't even know I had repressed that were affecting me. That was really valuable. Additionally, the metaphor I like to give is, if you went to the doctors and they scanned your lungs and they show you the x-ray and there's a tumor on your lungs, the doctor might tell you all the reasons why you developed the tumor, and the doctor may tell you all that changes you need to make moving forward to not develop more tumors. But the doctor is going to treat the tumor and most likely do surgery to remove it. If they don't do that, you're going to remain sick. And so likewise, when it comes to these emotions, we have emotional wounds that develop over our entire life, from abandonment and embarrassing experiences and trauma and accidents and heartbreak and grief and all these things we've experienced. We can have these literally trapped and repressed emotions that are still alive inside. And you will know because maybe you think of a memory and you kind of shudder, or you can relive the experience of that emotion. Well, we might be aware that it's there and you might be aware of all the issues that have happened in your life, but let's go in and actually remove those emotional wounds. And to me, that's what energy work is. It is the energetic surgery to clear and release these emotions and pains that have accumulated over a life that are keeping us stuck or feeling sick, so that you can truly, your body can truly heal itself and you can feel better physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually.
Yeah, thanks so much for walking me through that. That's a really great like idea and image of like how emotions are just as important as any physical ills. And I mean, I believe that they're definitely connected, but it's certainly helpful to think of um, trauma or just difficult situations, however you experience something, and that those need to anything that still stays with you, it does function almost like a physical wound in a way. So that's a really good thing to pay attention to, I think.
Yeah.
um so you created a program called the her program, that really incorporates all the different kinds of energy work and coaching, and just a really a comprehensive step by step way to get to more empowered eating and to kind of address whatever is going on in your life. So I wanted to know if you could speak about that, what it is and what happens in it, and why'd you create it?
Sure, gladly. The HER program stands for Healing, Expansion, and Radiance. And it's the HER program for food freedom and self love. And so I take women through a 6 month program that focuses on the 5 bodies of health. So we're looking at the physical, mental, emotional, energetic, and spiritual bodies, which really are necessary to explore if someone's struggling with their relationship with food in their body. If you're missing one of those, you may find that you continue to struggle because each piece is key. And then within those, I give women a variety of really valuable lessons and video trainings that explains the psychology of each of those bodies of health and a lot of the subconscious issues that are going on. And then we will meet in group coaching and energy work calls twice a month. And I'll take them through the tapping process and Reiki, and we'll do some of the deeper dive and inner work together as a group, depending on whatever is present for them or really needing to be addressed. And a lot of times that is looking at some of these experiences in the past, like we discussed, that shaped their eating programming or their beliefs about body image, or any sort of traumatic experiences that perhaps are still alive inside. It's an opportunity for us to actually go in and do that energetic surgery together. And there's something really beautiful that happens when women come together and heal together. Oftentimes we are mirrors of each other, and most women come to me because they have so much shame about the challenges that they've been experiencing, and the moment they realize they're not alone and oh my goodness, me too, this is exactly what my experience has been, there isn't something wrong with me. Women can release just through that alone so many years of anger and shame and hatred that they've held on to. So I really love hosting and having a group program where women get to come together and support each other through the journey and know that they're not alone and they are supported, and they don't have to be perfect. You don't have to wear a mask. You can just show up and be yourself and be raw and be vulnerable and have hard times and that be okay, and have moments of victory and celebrate those together, and just know that you're not alone on the journey.
Yeah, the community aspect, I found it again and again, like super important. And especially if you join a program like yours, like you do access community through that. And especially for whatever journey that you're working on, I love that it's like so focused and everyone enters into this journey with this focus. So I'm sure that energy alone really provides community to everyone in it.
Yeah, and most people, myself included, a lot of times our issues with food in our body are our secret. We don't talk about it with other people. I didn't tell anybody I had bulimia until after I had gotten better because I had so much shame when I was struggling with it. And I was too embarrassed. My pride was too great to let anyone know I have this issue. So most of the women I work with, maybe one or two people in their life know, but for the most part, they haven't talked about this with anybody, right? And we need to be able to use our voice and speak our truth and realize that that isn't going to lead to all these horrible outcomes. People aren't going to abandon us, like that it's safe to do that.
Yeah, for sure. Being able to share something that you feel so strongly is like a deep reflection of yourself.
Mhm.
Um, and it's like in a highly negative way. I'm sure, sharing it um, brings a lot of connection, a
Absolutely.
pathway to developing all kinds of connections.
Yes, it's definitely bonds the woman.
So, I wanted to know what are a few practices that support healthy and sustainable relationship with food? I'm sure you present some of these in the program. I was wondering if you could share a few of those here.
Happy to. I think if I was to give advice to any person who's starting out on this journey, there's a few things to consider and start to practice. The first is to look at how you're eating currently. I know for myself, I was trying to do diet plans. I was trying to do intermittent fasting. I was trying to control everything I ate. I had food rules about what I could and couldn't have. And I was eating on the go. I wasn't sitting down for meals. I was eating in between clients. I was eating in the car, but I just didn't have a healthy eating ritual. So I think one of the best places for people to start is to look at, take inventory of like, what are your eating habits and go back to basics. By that, I mean, uh, immediately stop all diets. Diets are without a doubt the number one thing that sets people up to develop binge eating. So if we're not eating a diet, that means you're just eating sensibly. You're sitting down for a meal at a table without distractions and eating real foods that you enjoy. Really get away from the food rules and try and create a sort of, I like to call it a sacred eating ritual, but starting to view meals as an opportunity to connect with your food and your body and yourself, and a time for you to eat or enjoy your food. And enjoying means you eat, enjoy, right? So this gets to be like a time I look forward to rather than a time that creates anxiety and dread. So make sure to schedule designated meal times rather than eating on the go or snacking or eating in front of the computer. Like mealtime is a non negotiable time where I prioritize simply eating and being with myself or my family. The other thing that I would encourage people to really look at are some of the language they use. A lot of times there's words about this food is good and this food is bad. And the problem with that is if you eat a food that you've decided is a bad food, you now internalize that, therefore, I am bad, or there's something wrong with me, or I've done a bad thing. And that creates guilt and shame. If you're an emotional eater, the way you respond to those emotions is you end up eating more. And so that can quickly send people on a downward spiral to make poor food choices. So from this point forward, I would encourage people not to say something is good or bad. We just look at the facts. This food maybe has more nutrients, it's more nutrient dense. And this food, if it's a cookie, may not actually have nutrients, but it's something I can still enjoy. That can still be a good food to eat if you're in celebration, if it's a holiday, right? So that doesn't have to be something bad that creates shame.
Yeah, the scheduling of the meal is really important. I feel that's a really good thing to know, and I feel you're really talking about bringing this um, activity, eating, which we all must for our bodies and ourselves, into a more positive space, almost like doing everything possible to like make it enjoyable. Because I feel if you've spent so much time fearing it, you really need to find ways to make it enjoyable. And with more practice, hopefully, it will become the enjoyable, pleasurable activity that I feel that it's meant to be.
Exactly. Because a lot of times we just eat on autopilot or we're just going through automatic motions, but we're not actually enjoying our meal. It's more like a chore. Or, like we've said with eating disorder, something you dread or that creates anxiety. So, how do I make this like something I look forward to every day and feel excited about? And don't make that wrong or bad. I think I want women to know it's okay to be hungry and it's okay to satisfy your hunger and nourish your body. Like, those are not bad things, right? Those are necessary things. And those are things that are aligned with self love.
Yeah, for sure. That I'm sure that's really important for you to mention when you kind of do this program. That especially like you know hunger, you know, just like if you feel something like hunger, like it needs to be addressed. We can't just ignore it, and that's probably connected with your voice and intuition and different things.
Yeah.
So thank you for mentioning that. Before we close, is there anything that you like to talk about or mention?
I feel like we've covered a lot of bases. So it's been such a nice, in depth conversation. I think the only thing I would mention to people is to also just have reasonable expectations wherever they're at with their relationship with food in their body. If you look at your age, then these are habits that have probably been developing over your entire life. And so, women come to me or join this program and they think like week one, it'll all shift. And if you didn't get here overnight, just keep your expectations reasonable for yourself, whether you're working with someone or on your own, that, these are changes that are going to take time. And it's normal to have setbacks. It's normal to feel like um, helpless or like it isn't working. And the most important thing is that people recommit. They recommit to themselves and whatever process they're on to try and improve that relationship because these are really deeply ingrained habits that they're trying to change.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I'm sure you kind of have a time frame that you bring to the practice and kind of set certain expectations because I'm sure that gets in the way sometimes when something feels very urgent. Um,
Exactly. And understandably, the desire to change these eating habits is urgent. This is someone's health, mental and physical. So it does matter. And we don't want to dilly dally. And that's why, a talk therapy, I felt like we're talking a lot about this. And I don't feel like people are getting better as quick as I want them to, right? I felt this sense of urgency. And so I do find that energy work is a quicker path to that end goal, which is nice. But, that still is a process. And as with anything that we're trying to improve, cancer, you're going to have multiple treatments. If you're struggling with a heart condition, you're maybe always going to be taking medicine to monitor it. And so, these are things we're working on changing lifestyles for the long term as well.
right. That makes a lot of sense. One more question before we end the conversation. What is currently inspiring you?
Ooh, that's a good one. Honestly, nature. I was up in Tahoe and just being immersed in the beauty of the trees and the water and the wildlife there. For me, when I just sit and I observe that, it is inspiring because it kind of, for me, reflects life, right? Their creation. Things are always in creation, things are always dying. There's this innate intelligence, there's this wisdom that you can tap into, and it allows me to reconnect to myself, but also this greater power that is sort of guiding all of us and fueling our life force. And when I can make that connection and tap into that place, I feel like, I'm just really inspired and excited about life and being a creator myself.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And thank you so much for making the time for this conversation. It was very, very interesting and inspiring as well. So I hope you continue to do the work that you've been doing so far.
Thank you so much. It was an honor and pleasure for me to be able to share my story and this information with you and your listeners. So thank you for the opportunity.